Hey guys, it's Standing for Truth coming to you tonight. We are live for a really fun stream, an important stream. I've got Landon, Ra, Matt, and Jeremy here. It is some phylogeny challenge debunking time. Ra, Matt, and I put out a video just the other day demonstrating how fallacious the phylogeny challenge really is. So watch that. Now we're actually going to get right into the meat and potatoes of it, right down to the science. We're going to dismantle and give that fatal blow to phylogenetic systematics, the so-called best evidence for evolution, according to Aron Ra. Really, the first and primary assumption of evolutionary phylogenetic classification, which is what we're getting into here, is that common ancestry is true. And this assumption never goes unquestioned, even though there's so many different things that actually contradict this tree, which is why they have to invoke certain processes like convergent evolution, or even loss of traits. So it's also based a lot on the outdated junk DNA. And DNA functions are only beginning to be found during the last decade, which means, and as I've said before, we understand less than 5% of the DNA language. And that trajectory strongly suggests the vast majority of DNA will be functional for many reasons that we'll get into a little more deep later. But this takes away that assumption, and there are other assumptions we're going to get into, but it takes away that assumption of evolutionary phylogenetics based on evolutionary leftovers such as pseudogenes and mutations. Because if the vast majority of DNA is functional, it becomes a common design argument, as creationists have always predicted that the vast majority of DNA is actually functional. Now, I'm going to be sharing screen here at a few things because it's important to know that since phylogenetic systematics is based on that primary assumption that pond scum to people evolution is true, based on genetics, based on mutations and the lack of creative powers for mutations and natural selection, this strongly indicates that universal common ancestry can't be true. Which means evolutionary phylogenetic systematics is destroyed on its own by that very fact. But we're going to get into, I'm going to share a screen here just so you guys can see. If we think of genomic degradation, because it comes down to net loss versus net gain, and this is something that Aron Ra himself would have to deal with if he wants to use phylogenetic systematics and the phylogeny challenge against creationists, because we have a genome, 3 billion letters, and take out one letter, change one letter, say randomly, you're not going to have a huge fitness effect. It's only going to be a tiny fitness effect. And it's a fact that it's kind of like rust on a car. You can't see each rust event, but it's continuous and it's destruction. Most mutations we now know are nearly neutral. They accumulate very small effects and accumulate relentlessly. That means all mutations must have some effect on fitness, no matter how small and trivial. That means there are obvious shelf lives on genomes, and that means natural selection and mutations are not going to be able to build a genome. Natural selection acting upon random variation is not going to take your fish to fisherman. Now, I'm going to quickly share screen here at a couple things, and then we're going to get into Ra Matt, who's going to take over. But I want to share a screen on a few papers because we're going to have all sources listed, and this is a fatal blow to evolutionary theory right here. Not only Haldane's dilemma, but the waiting time problem. I hope everybody can see it. And in a nutshell, it's kind of technical. Paper will be presented for anyone to deal with. I highly doubt Aron Ra, who isn't very strong in genetics, and we're going to really take the attack to him genetically speaking and stay tuned and stick to the end, because we will answer his phylogeny challenge in regards to created kinds. And we're going to do it the right way, and we're going to do it the way that, as far as we know, no creationist has done thus far. Now, why is the waiting time so long? Well, firstly, if you're just waiting for, say, a single mutation, a single nucleotide change, and you're waiting for that mutation to catch hold in the population and then become fixated, it's actually surprisingly long to just make a specific nucleotide change. About 1.5 million years. And so this ape to man timeline is about 6 million years. And this is only changing one letter. And so if you're waiting for a string of 2, it's going to take you, if you're following, 84 million years. A string of 3, let's say, a new codon changing an amino acid, 376 million years, and it goes up from there. Let's say a string of 8, which would be a short genetic word. You need more time than the universe itself has had. And this paper here has been read by 10,000 scientists. It's rock solid. There's no serious rebuttal to it. Genomic degradation, genetic entropy, the only arguments or rebuttals that they'll have are, for example, right here. If you want to watch my debates, say against RJ Downer, Jackson Wheat, this is where they get their arguments. That'll be posted as well. This is really the best that Aron Ra is going to have. So if he does address this, he won't be able to, but if he does, just look out, because these are the arguments he's going to get. There's an Amazon.com review. Very weak. There's no serious population geneticist that has written peer-reviewed rebuttals to Dr. John Sanford's work here. And some of the arguments would be, say, beneficial mutations, but due to the influx of deleterious mutations, that rare occurrence of beneficial mutations cannot compensate for the information loss. And they'll go to John Sanford and the accusation of him misrepresenting Camorra, but this is a rabbit trail, because John Sanford shows a larger zone of no selection than Camorra does, because Camorra's analysis of the problem was oversimplified, and the crucial issue is about defining the correct distribution of mutation effects. Aron Ra is going to have to deal with this and understand this if he wants to rebut this video, because Camorra does not show the beneficial distribution. This is what the evolutionists don't understand when they read these rebuttals that I've just shown you, and that you can go look at yourself. They're weak. They're not strong. This distribution of beneficials is absolutely essential to the question of net gain versus net loss. The fact that the vast majority of beneficials will be unselectable is a huge problem for evolutionists, because it's quite easy to see that most of these deleterious mutations fall within the no selection zone, and that almost all of them are deleterious. So even with strong selection, the entire zone can only undergo degeneration. Now, when you look at these rebuttals, they speak of the obvious. Natural selection happens, adaptation happens, beneficials happen, but anybody with basic understanding of genetics understands these things. And this is why the rebuttals are so weak, because the argument of genetic entropy happens after acknowledging these things, because outside this zone, the substantially bad mutations will be selected away, and an occasional rare high impact beneficial will be amplified. But based on the accumulating damage, based on the influx of deleterious mutations, not even duplications, because duplications are overwhelmingly deleterious. So duplications, beneficials cannot counterbalance the influx of deleterious mutations. This is also consistent with creation. They have rescue devices. Not sure if Aron Ra would even be aware of them. They got mutation count mechanism, not biologically real. Simulations have disproven this. And this model does not even remotely resemble reality. Synergistic epistasis, also extensive numerical simulation experiments have falsified this mechanism. We're not just saying these things, guys. You can go here. You can see the papers. They're all here. Aron Ra is going to have to address these instead of just using the typical weak, sad rebuttals that I've seen from people like Jackson Wheat, RJ Downer, Nestling, Rationale Mind. It's right here, the fundamental theorem of natural selection with mutations. Very, very interesting paper. Everything's backed up in regards to what I just said. We have one here, selection threshold severely constrains capture of beneficial mutations. If I went over all this, we'd be here for 10 hours. That's why the sources, citations are here. Can purifying natural selection preserve biological information? And the best they got is right here, a review from Amazon.com, which has already been destroyed, and a blog, which also has been destroyed. So phylogenetic systematics is based on a primary assumption that universal common ancestry is true. Based on what we know about deleterious mutation accumulation, we know that it can't be true. So using the fossil record would certainly be fallacious. Evidence for genomic degradation, it's everywhere. Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, asthma, autoimmune cancers, immunological related diseases. There's a pandemic, entropic degeneration on all levels. A lot of those are epigenetic related, but that just shows more that it's entropic degeneration on all levels. Neanderthals were highly inbred. We got paleogenomic evidence. Hobbits, they were very highly inbred. They appear to suffer from reductive evolution. This results in reduced body size, reduced brain volume, and various pathologies. Homo naledi, Homo erectus, both highly inbred and suffered from reductive evolution. What we see in the fossil record, what we know about this variation of humans fits a biblical creation model a lot better than what Aron Ra here has been presenting. Like I said, mammoth populations, highly inbred, carried an elevated genetic load. We even see it in butterfly populations, cheetah populations. We see it in bacteria. Very, very common, very, very uncontested that reductive evolution is a commonplace in bacteria. Lenski himself has demonstrated reductive evolution because a lot of these beneficial mutations, not all of them, adaptations have happened, but a lot of them have been reductive, loss of function, loss of promoter, loss of genes, net loss of information. Aron Ra, I'd love to see him present some examples of new novel information being added to the genome, and it comes down to a net gain versus a net loss. So examples such as African resistance to malaria, that's a broken hemoglobin protein. European adult lactose tolerance due to a broken lactose promoter. Melano mutation, loss of net specificity. We've already went over the Lenski experiment. Nylon digestion, also loss of net specificity. Things like adaptive immunity, homologous recombination, antibiotic resistance in bacteria, sickle cell anemia, like I said, they fail to meet the requirements of a gain in net information, and gene duplications, as I said earlier, almost universally deleterious. Aron Ra, you can have 2 or 3 beneficial mutations, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because due to the influx of the deleterious ones, there's no way to compensate for the information loss. We're going down, not up. Your primary assumption of phylogenetic systematics is wrong, which means your so-called best evidence for evolution is wrong. I'm going to send it off to Ra Matt, who's going to touch on some of the taxonomy and some of the other related cladistics, for example. Ra Matt, take over, brother.
All right, sure, no problem. But before we do that, there's been a new study that even shows that the HeLa cells, which are known as the immortal cancer cells that have been used for experimenting on cancer for a very long time now, they actually did an experiment to test their mutation rate. They've actually found that they are only 13% of them have not been degraded by some form of deleterious mutation. The rest are under heavy amounts of bombardment. They actually predicted that they will be gone very soon. They're out of it. So that's a great one. That's obviously in the next video coming out as well, so you'll like that one. And yeah, the taxonomy, it's just trickery. You know, they like to do this. They use it in all things. They say, well, you're a eukaryote, aren't you? Well, yeah, of course, because that's a simplistic way of saying something. So then they go, well, if you're a eukaryote, you're also a vertebrate, right? You go, okay, well, yeah. And they go, well, you're a mammal too, right? You go, well, yeah. And then they say, well, see, you're an ape next. See how and then go, well, you're an animal as well, right? So they set it up like dominoes to clump you all together. They just start small and they build high, and then they knock them all down and say, see, you're right there. They try to do this with arachnids and spiders as well, but yet even evolutionists will say and tell you that they're not even on the same tree. They'll put them on a branch, but they won't connect them to any common ancestor. So they know that it's kind of faulty if they actually look at it intellectually honestly, but we both know that they don't do that. So the phylogenetic systematics holds that taxonomic groups should always be monophyletic, meaning that they should always include all the descendants of one ancestor and don't leave any descendants out. And if we must accept that humans are apes, then we must also accept that chimpanzees are monkeys. And since that's 100% wrong, then saying that humans are apes is also 100% wrong. I can go on. They use different variations to build these phylogenetic trees. I'm just talking about taxonomy right now. I mean, they use various nucleotide variations to build put species and individuals, and then they use the taxonomy cladistics, and then they use homology, which is physical similarities. They go, well, we have hands and so do primates, so it's pretty obvious that we're connected, but yet we're not connected to the raccoon at all, whose hand is far more similar to ours. So you see, they can draw all the lines that they want, and then it just gets more confusing and more befuddling to them when genetics gets added, because similarities between us and apes are even less than they are between dogs and humans or pigs and humans. So they got huge problems themselves. That's why they push the challenge onto creationists, like it's our problem and that we need to solve it. It's their theory. They need to solve it. It has nothing to do with us. So what do you think?
Yeah, those are some very good points. Even in regards to that example that you brought up on genomic degradation, I mean, the evidence is everywhere. They scoff. Where's the evidence? I mean, are your eyes open? We've even seen, like I said, genetic load in butterfly populations. We've even seen it in viruses, bacteria. It's everywhere. So it's really tough to have a primary assumption that universal common ancestry is true when all the empirical data points to it not being true. And they have to use evidence, just like I got on the screen here, convergent evolution. As Jeremy here is going to be talking, I'm going to be going through some slides just for a visual for people to look at, because we're going to kill this double time through visuals and through audio. So pay attention. Jeremy, how do you feel about phylogenetic systematics, and how do you feel about that being the so-called, quote unquote, best evidence for pawns come to people evolution? Go ahead, brother.
Absolutely wrong. Aron Ra's phylogeny challenge is not the best evidence for evolution. Why? Because Aron Ra's phylogeny challenge has a severe lack of genetics, as in severe lack of genetics. And genetics is now the key to looking at the molecular details of physical homology. Scientists look more on the genetics these days. So I don't even understand why Aron Ra doesn't know this. So the lack of DNA data alone weakens severely weakens his phylogeny. And I can even help him and try to fill in some genetics into his phylogeny challenge. Okay? Then later, debunk it quickly. So if, for example, if Aron Ra and evolutionists were to say that his phylogeny also shows homology from genetic data, it could easily be explained away by common design, right? What Aron Ra, here's my advice to him. What Aron Ra must show are specific genetic markers, okay, that show the what? Not very good at English, so please bear with me. What Aron Ra must show are specific genetic markers or signatures that show the signature of common ancestry from every tip and from every branch points of his tree. And there are none. Okay? He might appeal to other evolutionists to please put something here, put the genetics here, connect the worms to the humans, connect the chimpanzee to the humans. So lack of genetic data alone destroys his phylogeny. Okay? But like I said, I can fill in the genetics of his phylogeny myself and debunk it myself. Okay? Okay, so let's say this scenario, even if he and evolutionists were able to show some of the genetic marker signatures that we're daring him to show, it will all be based on less than 5% of the DNA language. And you don't say that something is evidence based on only 5% of the data. Okay, it means our DNA knowledge is still at its infancy. Okay, actually, if other evolutionists are willing to help Aron Ra, they might show mutational signatures that are shared among different species as leftover junk from evolutionary history. So these genetic marker signatures must not be functional. They should be junk, because if they are functional, they become a common designer argument. Because those genetic markers in DNA used to construct the tree are leftovers from evolutionary millions of years. So logically, they should be junk by now, although some could still be functional, but they didn't predict that. They predicted a completely junk genome before 2001. Yeah. So in 2001, junk DNA was said to have been proven and was the primary tool and assumption to build evolutionary phylogenetics. So take away junk DNA, it severely compromises evolutionary phylogenetics with those genetic markers. Okay. Actually, but here's the thing. 10 years after they thought they proved the junk DNA collapsed just in 10 years. When junk DNA collapses, genetic marker signatures suggesting common ancestry is also compromised, of course. And the domino effect, domino effect, correct? Yeah, I think, yeah. Sorry for my English. The domino effect and the domino effect if those junk DNA collapses, and at the same time those genetic marker signatures also collapses, the domino effect would affect a lot of evolutionary evidences, especially like I said yesterday in the video, evolutionary population genetics, because it assumes common ancestry. Okay, so am I going to go to those specific markers standing for truth? Hello?
Is he
Hey, brother,
muted?
I was muted. Yes, we're gonna go to those specific genetic markers.
Okay. So we're going further. Okay. I doubt even Aron Ra knows about this. These are the real best evidence for evolution, and many evolutionists don't even know it. Man, in the other videos, right, we've exposed several atheists.
Yes, and we're definitely going to put that as well. You know, it's good to go look at these videos where the evolutionists themselves, the evolutionary heavyweights, are exposed for not understanding, the details of phylogenetic systematics, genetic markers just being one of them. So keep her going there, Jeremy.
Well, since I think Aron Ra needs help to put some genetic markers or the mutational signatures that connect one animal to another, yeah, he's gonna need help. So let's assume somebody helps him and puts those genetic markers on his tree. A genetic marker, for example, that connects worms to humans or gorilla to human, like that. Okay, those are the things that are not in Aron Ra's phylogeny challenge. I can even feel it for him. I'm a former atheist evolutionist, studied these for so long. Okay, let's go to the specific markers that we pretend that evolutionists have helped Aron Ra put those genetic markers in his tree tips and branches. I'll give a few examples. I think I'll just mention a couple. The most commonly used ones, for example, is the popular whale smelling gene. which whales don't need, because whales live on the oceans, right? They're sea-based. But these are also found in land creatures. Wow, it looks like evolution. Don't get too excited, atheist apes. But these are found in land creatures also, which suggests the whales inherited that mutation when it was still a four-limbed land creature. Now, to refute this is the fact that we don't really know if it's really a mutation. Okay? We don't really know if it's really a mutation. Many previously thought of as mutations in genetics have now been debunked, because functions are found everywhere. This is not the original prediction of evolutionists. Creationists are now debunking second to third to fourth level rescuing devices evolutionists have conceived. The original predictions are gone and dead. That's how fast evolution is being debunked. And they debunk it themselves. We don't even need to do much. And they even prove creation for us sometimes. All right. Where was I? And yeah, in evolutionary literature, they love to say, we were wrong before, we need to rethink this and that and so on. Yeah. All right, going back to the whale. Sorry for going somewhere there. Plus, comprehensive genetic knockout and long-term effects testing on the whales. Okay, sorry. Again, comprehensive genetic knockout and long-term effects tests on the whale smelling gene has not been done. So we don't know what happens if it gets removed. When it gets removed, then something bad happens. Then we can know precisely what the function of that smelling gene is. And it can't be considered a whale smelling gene anymore, depending on what function is found that affected the whale after after the gene knockout is performed. So in short, the whale genetic marker is based on limited DNA data and cannot pass in court. Sorry for spoiling. All right. Aside from the whale smelling gene, there are a lot more. What's another good example? Never mind. I'll just go for another whale, because whale is one of the favorite examples of BioLogos, the leading Christian evolutionist organization in the world. It is kind of like their poster genetic marker, because the whale alone has 3 genetic markers or mutational signatures which seems to show common ancestry, which looks like common ancestry according to them. Okay, I respect theistic evolutionists or Christian evolutionists. It is the atheist evolutionists I don't respect, but I have no choice but to refute other Christians from the Christian evolutionist camp. So, okay. Anyway, sorry for. Okay, there is also another genetic marker, also whales. There's also the whale Hox gene. The whale Hox gene for four-limb production. Okay, there's a Hox gene in the whale that seems to be on its way to create 4 limbs for the whale. Okay, these Hox genes seems to contain instructions. It seems to be designed to create a four limbs for the whale. Okay, and we know that the whales don't need these 4 limbs because they are sea-based. They don't need to walk on water. Okay, now so this evidence suggests that the whale inherited this Hox gene when the whale was still a four-limbed land creature. Okay, so what happens is really like this. This is the whale Hox gene that tries to create the 4 limbs, right? And then suddenly another set of Hox genes overrides the original code. That it's not the original, sorry. Another set of Hox genes overrides the attempt of the Hox gene to create a 4-limbed whale. All right. So evolutionists infer that these Hox genes have been turned off or something, because the whales are going to finally evolve since those land creatures are about to become whale already. Okay, so they don't need them anymore. So evolution kind of, you know, did its thing. Okay. Okay. Again, by the way, to refute this, this is again based on a limited amount of data. Really, based on really small subsets. No comprehensive study, really. Okay, and there are many comprehensive studies before that turned out to be wrong. So many blunders in evolutionary literature, really. Okay, and also regarding this whale Hox gene, evolutionists predict that genes for over millions of years of evolution should evolve, change, or suffer high mutations. Correct, but this Hox gene remained constant. So how did it happen? Must be a super gene. No, no, no. Evolutionists cannot accept any supers here or supernatural, correct? Right? So why then have these Hox gene sequence remained unchanged in evolutionary history, including this four-limbed production gene? Correct? That's the question evolutionists must now answer. And given the current observed rate of mutations, it doesn't make sense that the region which contains the four-limb Hox gene would not have changed genetically if it weren't somehow important, because we know how evolution likes to remove this, remove that, if it doesn't need it anymore. Well, at least that was their original prediction and it failed. Okay. All right. So as you can see, I have filled in Aron Ra's mammals to whale, land mammals to whale evolution. I just helped him, but I also debunked it. All right, I also debunked it at the same time. Sorry, Aron. Now, let's go to another part of his phylogeny tree, the human evolution section. One of the favorites of evolutionists. Okay. Now, for the human evolution section of the genetic markers shared between chimps, gorillas, and orangutan, and human, of course, part of their tree. Once again, these uses only small subsets to infer generational coalescence to mutational signatures shared between the species. And once again, based on the assumptions that those genetic signatures are pseudogenes. And many pseudogenes, as we know, are not predicted by evolution, not the original prediction. And many pseudogenes have now been found to have significant functions. Also, so it compromises the genetic markers there. Also, this pattern of generational coalescence to mutational, it's really so long. Mutational signatures are also predicted by creationists. Okay, did you hear me? Also, this pattern of generational coalescence, gorilla, chimp, then human. Okay, these mutational signatures. Okay, let's remove human there. Are also predicted by creationists on the chimp, gorilla, orangutan, since they are all the same family. So if you see the rate and changes of those mutations from one lineage to another, let's say gorilla to chimp, those are also predicted by creationists because we classify them as of the same kind. So it's no threat. The only problem is that humans also share the same mutational signature. So it's not really that of a big problem, okay? And evolutionists portray it as a big problem, but I don't see it as a big problem at all. So in order to completely remove this from the human line, because those mutational signatures seems to connect this to the human line, gorilla, then chimp, human. There's mutational signatures that only suggest common ancestry if you assume evolution. So in order to completely remove this from the human line, creationist research, through creationist research, which, as we know, does strip away evolutionary bias, have lowered the human-chimp DNA similarity from 95% to just about 89%, and it could even be lower. Okay, there are a lot of evolutionary bias on counting human and chimp similarities. Okay, a lot, and I do not have enough time to explain it here. But that's one way to separate the humans. And this really, when you separate that, this endangers the coalescence to, here I go again, the long one. It endangers the coalescence to mutational signatures that associate human to the chimp gorilla line. Okay, so it breaks it apart. More and more research are suggesting how unique humans are compared to other species on Earth, and that would help separate the human line from the chimp gorilla line. There are a lot more evidence, but I have no. I'm having a time constraints here, so let's try another genetic marker. Let's make it more generalized. Okay, so I gave Aron Ra the genetic markers for the whale, the land animal to whale, and now from human to chimp, gorilla. So I'll try to generalize his entire phylogeny. Okay, so I'll just refute it all in one, because if I go a specific genetic marker, it will take forever. Okay, now let's refute some of the non-specific genetic markers. Like I said, let's refute the Synteny arrangements. The Synteny arrangements, for example. Okay, of course, Aron Ra does not. I don't think he knows about these Synteny arrangements also, because he is so weak, and he I don't think he even knows much genetics. Let's refute. I could myself put Synteny arrangements in his tree. DNA sequences from the common ancestry tree of Aron Ra will have a very wide array of Synteny arrangements if I do the work for him. Okay, and those Synteny arrangements are have chromosomal rearrangements greatly more diverse in one lineage compared to another lineage far apart in his phylogeny tree. The more divergent the individual gene sequence are between two species, the fewer genes are retained in the synthetic group. Okay, so I gave creationists a problem, but I will lift the problem immediately. It's quite easy to refute. If we were made by the same creator, this is exactly what we would predict also. That our human DNA Synteny arrangements, for example, would vary a lot from the Synteny arrangements from a species far from the human line. Okay, for example, human Synteny arrangements compared to fruit flies vary a lot. Huge difference. So the creator would create vastly dissimilar designs among very dissimilar creatures also. Okay, so the creation model, of course, predicts that the creator would create vastly dissimilar designs among these very dissimilar creatures also. And that's also how we today design things in most cases. So this pattern of Synteny arrangements is no threat to creationists, even if we give it to Aron Ra. Okay, so I've helped Aron Ra, but took away the help immediately. So so is that enough? Standing for truth, is that enough?
I think he's muted. Hold on a second.
Yeah, no, I was just going over some visuals and papers there to support, for one, the degeneration process that creationists look to, but also, Jeremy, in regards to what you said, junk DNA and the overturning of junk DNA, I think is important too. And I think from a lot of the evolutionists that we've talked to, a lot of them will still say, hey, you know, it's 20% is the maximum. But what they don't understand is that we're just beginning. We're just beginning to understand the development process, how coding and non-coding DNA coordinate when, where, and say how structures are sequentially put in place to produce this fully functional organism. So the amount of genes that are actually turned on and off, silenced, to say it's only 20% functional max, would you say that that is a biased conclusion based on the evidence?
Yes. That 20% has, okay, by the way, a little history. They predicted over 90% junk in the 1970s. Okay, and then in 2001, they found out that they thought they proved junk DNA when over 99%. Is that the exact number? They or 98% of DNA was junk in 2001, and they were so sure. They were so sure, 100% sure, that even led many scientists to not check the junk areas of DNA. They were so sure in 2001 that this is it, 98% junk. We're done. Evolution is proven, and so on. Right now, they are sure again, 20%. They are sure again. In 10 years, it can go up to 50%, and they are going to be sure again for 50%. Okay? Ignorance of the data and rejecting the model of the competing view is making them, is forcing them to keep on making these blunders. So what is sure today will be debunked in 10 years. What was sure in 2001, 98%, is solely being debunked by ENCODE, and even those most biased evolutionists would say, okay, sige, 20%, like you said, standing for truth. But we are so sure now. We are so sure. 20% is the max, just like before. 98%, that's it. Wait in 10 years or 20 years. Creationist prediction will again shock you.
And what's funny too is a lot of this, just like we were talking about at the beginning, that a lot of the phylogenetic systematic methodologies is based on, so little of the DNA language that we actually understand, just like the egg yolk gene, that pseudo gene, and how that's been completely overturned, and that there's just so little DNA remnant of the actual egg yolk gene. It just required such a
20%. 20%.
Exactly. And it just required such a wide imagination, extravagant imagination, to actually pursue that line of reasoning, because now we know that all they did was assume junk DNA. Then they mistook the functional DNA sequence as a non-functional egg yolk gene, and now we know that it's a functional element. And the thing is, preliminary biochemical evidence for function doesn't just exist merely for the examples of pseudogenes we've been talking about. It exists for over 80% of the areas looked at. So with more testing, just like you said, in regards to the gene knockout tests, the trajectory is strong. And is that how we, is it genetics where we identify the main core of Aron Ra's phylogeny challenge within the identification of the created kinds?
The created kinds. What do you mean? Can you elaborate? Sorry.
Because when we're looking at what has a common ancestor versus what doesn't have a common ancestor, we're looking at what's functionally unique across.
There are many ways, standing for truth. There are many ways to sort it out. So yeah, and yes, Aron Ra did
go into that.
The created kinds.
Yes.
Yeah. So Aron Ra's challenge to creation is to prove the created kinds. Correct.
Correct.
Really? Seriously? Even if we provide data, what makes you say that he will even listen? Bias is their way of life. The most biased people on earth, atheists. What makes you even say that they ask for evidence, then when we give the evidence, it's not enough, and so on and so forth. Anyway, let's go to the his challenge. So we'll just give the answers to creationists because we know Aron Ra doesn't really care about evidence.
Exactly.
Yeah. So he likes us to prove that create the created kinds, right? Okay. All right. Where should I start? But I will go into the genetics. Okay.
Yeah.
I am not very good at the I think raw math is better.
Well,
better.
it's genetics where we've destroyed phylogenetic systematics to begin
Yeah.
with. Matt touched
Yes.
on taxonomy, cladistics, and to the audience, go watch that video titled "Raw Matt Debunks the Phylogeny Challenge," quote unquote, just to show how fallacious the challenge really is. Jeremy,
Okay, so,
hit him hard with genetics and show him why this challenge is easily debunked. Go ahead, brother.
yeah, I already hit them hard several
Yes,
minutes.
you
But
did.
that's
Yes.
yeah. Aron Ra likes creationists to prove the created kinds. Okay, so all right. There are animals today which creationists classify as separate kinds, which show genetic differences larger compared to another kind, which separates one kind from another. So there are some evidence, some many preliminary that that creationists have inferred as a separate kind, which have genetic differences that are that if you compare to another kind are a lot. But this is not consistent because sometimes even the created kinds themselves don't have much genetic difference. So we're still finding out why is it like that. Okay, but there are other evidence, like I said, which shows that the created kinds are really distinct because they are separated by a good number amount of genetic differences. Okay, the knowledge we have on DNA is only at its infancy, as we know. Okay, some ignorant evolutionists who don't even know their own theory think that we know a lot about DNA. Even Dr. Francis Collins of Biologos, the world's leading expert in DNA, who was the head of the Human Genome Project, okay, and is the current National Institute for Health secretary or head in the U.S. government, and has been to the White House many times. So how can those atheists say Francis Collins is weak? Well, sorry. Let me continue. Dr. Francis Collins said, shucks, I forgot what he said. He said that currently we don't know much about DNA. We thought we knew a lot, but the collapse of junk DNA made us rethink everything about DNA. He said something like that, not exactly like that, but he said many things before that we thought were mutations turn out to be functional. Those mutations we thought we were 100% sure that our mutations turn out to be functional. So we really don't know. We thought we knew how to check for mutations, but we don't. Okay, and of course he respects the ENCODE project, which revealed that 80% biochemical activity that the DNA is functional, and sets a trajectory for genome-wide function. Okay. Okay. Now, even at the infancy of DNA, we are beginning to witness genetic data which shows that 90% of species arising today. Ooh, the atheists might come after me regarding this because they went after this, as we know. And I think standing for truth, you know about this too. We are beginning to witness genetic data which shows that 90% of the species today have arisen forgot the exact number. They've arisen together. Okay, they've arisen together. 90% of the species today. This was not predicted by evolutionary theory, and this was predicted by the biblical flood model. After Noah and his family came out of the ark, and then speciation continued. 90% came out of it. And these species of the different kinds even show genetic borderlines between each kind. I'll explain the borderlines a little later. Wow. Okay. This evidence is actually preliminary, but it is a good hint. Okay. Don't forget, this is still the infancy of DNA, and yet we already found this. Okay. Don't forget the other findings: Y chromosome Adam, mitochondrial Eve, and so on. Of course, evolutionists say those mitochondrial Eve and Adam, other people live with them, but still it's too close for comfort for evolutionists. What are the odds that we all came from one man and one woman? Anyway, going back to the the created kinds. The 90% species are rising together as predicted by the biblical model. This evidence is preliminary, but it's a good hint, and it's too close for comfort for evolutionists. Because once again, as like many times before, genetics is pointing towards the Bible. Okay, actually, DNA barcoding is where we discovered this evidence. It uses small DNA subsets. Oh, evolutionists, I think, would jump to this. They only use small subset. Don't be too excited, atheists. I'm not against you if you're a theistic evolutionist or Christian evolutionist. I just hate atheist evolutionists. Okay, so it uses a small subset, and you can even say that it uses it is a subset within a subset, so it's even smaller. Ooh. Hey, one of the evolutionary objections is that, yeah, like I said, it's a small subset. Yet, they use small subsets in invoking their common ancestry genetic markers also. So if they can use the small subset, why can't creationists? Right? Bias. Oh, so easy. So biased and unfair. I'm a former atheist evolutionist, so I know how biased you apes are. For example, I've already cited this example. There are many examples of this, of atheists using just a super small subset, even smaller than this DNA barcoding. Evolutionists use, for example, 330 nucleotides only to infer common ancestry on one of their common ancestry lineage, using the insulin peptide gene, for example. So they have many genetic markers, correct? One of them, really unbelievably biased and cherry pick of data, uses only 330 nucleotides. Yet they don't want us to use the DNA barcoding, which has more nucleotides, far more. Yeah, and that's much smaller than the creationist barcode data. And this barcoding data also revealed low numbers of mitochondrial DNA differences within species of an animal kind. Okay, this is one animal kind. This is another. Okay, within the species of a kind here, the genetic differences here are small, but here, which borders another species, the genetic differences are bigger, a lot. It looks like God really wants to show that He created the kinds, the animals separately, not through evolution. This evidence shows that clearly. So even if okay, but yes, okay. So that's it, I think. Any questions? So as you can see, we have shown that there's preliminary data that proves that God really created different kinds of animals. He didn't use evolution or something. There is a genetic borderline. There is a genetic borderline, and like I said, we found this evidence while the DNA, while we are still at the infancy of DNA knowledge. a lot more will be coming.
Exactly,
So,
Jeremy.
Any questions?
No, I think you hit it hard there, where we're coming up and discovering all this massive amount of evidence just in the infancy of DNA discovery, because based on everything we know, based on how little we know about the developmental process, based on how little we know about epigenetic regulation, we speak less than 5%, maybe even less than 3% of the DNA language. And when you actually look at the history of genetics itself, it would be bias of the evolutionists to really say max amount of DNA that's functional is 20%, because look how much has been overturned. Back in the 40s, you got one gene, one protein, one function. But it's a given that that alone has been overturned. RNA was underappreciated, and we know that's decades ago biology, because there's massive amounts of literature that actually shows unexpected functions of RNA, right? We're dealing with a highly compressed DNA code here, and it's really beyond the best computer code there is. And the evolutionists hate when you compare it to a computer code, but based on what we know about the DNA language, that's the perfect way to describe it. I mean, we write books, but we don't write books that can be read forwards and backwards. DNA can. Proteins, I mean, look at protein moonlighting. Proteins are doing things you wouldn't even anticipate. The cell, right, it uses different redundant elements to slow and speed the process. It's a highly compressed DNA code. So the evidence is certainly on our side, and I can see why they have to fall back on non-functionality when in fact the trajectory is strong. And the phylogeny challenge is fallacious. Phylogenetic systematics is not a threat. Matt, Landon, Jeremy, anything to say, guys?
Yes.
Me?
Yeah, sorry, Landon, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought it was a good presentation. I mean, it was well presented, and I just want to say keep up the good work. I look forward to the next hangout.
Awesome. Thanks, Landon. And Matt, did you have anything to say? Just to let the audience know, we're going to be releasing a second part to the video that the atheists are just loving. Go check it out, titled Raw Matt Debunks Phylogeny Challenge. We're going to be releasing a second part soon. It's going to be those two parts plus this. That's the entire series you're going to want to watch that destroys Aron Ra's so-called best evidence for evolution. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think there's no reason to really go over anything now on it, just because we'll just save it for the video. I think it'll be more entertaining that way.
Yeah,
Because,
I agree.
the first part was actually not really debating the actual challenge itself. It was talking about the inconsistencies with the challenge. This time we're going to debunk it. So I don't want to give too much away. It's ready. It's exciting.
Awesome. And Jeremy, how about you, brother? Do you?
Yeah, I think I've already said a lot, but I would like to repeat something. My challenge to Aron Ra is to put genetic markers on every tip and branch of your tree. Your lack of DNA data alone in your phylogeny challenge is really laughable, because the best evidence for your evolution is not even your phylogeny. It is in genetics. And Biologos has some of the best evidence for evolution. Those genetic markers, those mutational signatures. And many evolutionists don't even know this. Shame, really.
And just looking at all the rescue devices that he would have to resort to based on the inconsistencies and significant lack of uniqueness of this phylogenetic tree, they need these rescue devices in order to explain away these problems, such as convergent evolution. And to the audience, this rescue device is nothing more than the appearance of the same trait in independent lineages. So what it is, it's an invention. Okay, so when you hear someone like Aron Ra talking about phylogenetic systematics and how consistent it is with the data, It's not nearly as consistent as he makes you want to think. For example, we have whales, dolphins, and bats. Those mammals are the only mammals that have echolocation systems. And when we look at the anatomy, when we study the anatomy, the whales and dolphins are classified closer to the cow than to the bats. And on the basis of their echolocation systems, they should belong with the bats. When you look at the protein Preston through a molecular analysis, puts whales and dolphins squarely with the bats. And this alone is strong evidence that this phylogenetic tree, it doesn't represent objective reality at all. And based on everything else that we said, it's a complete falsification of universal common ancestry. And Jeremy and I have seen what their best response to that could be. Go watch our video from last night, Rationale Mind, Irrational Mind, I should say. Only strengthened our case for what I just said about convergent evolution. Would you agree with that, Jeremy?
Yep. Thank you for strengthening our case, Irrational Mind. Sorry, Irrational Mind is the was he the one who tried to review us again, or was it Nestle?
It was both, wasn't it?
Well, it was both. Well, Nestle, I think.
I want to thank them for strengthening our case and for giving such a weak rebuttal. Thank you. And thank you for showing your bias too when you use population genetics, which I debunked yesterday, using those 5 assumptions that you use in population genetics. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And for anybody who watched the original video, go look at Nestlig's blog, compare it to what we said, especially in regards to genetic entropy. You're going to know exactly where he got the information. He goes on and presents what he believes are beneficial mutations that are not an overall deleterious mutation. But like I said, give him 2, give him 3, give him 4. You're going to have to present us with 1,000 examples in order to address the key issue, which is net gain versus net loss. Take 10 beneficial mutations. I don't even have to argue against them. Take your notothenioid fish like Ramat and I were talking about, because a couple beneficials are not going to counterbalance the influx of deleterious mutations. The arguments are weak. And then Rationale Mind, his rebuttal, go watch our video from last night. Not very impressive. And they've got rescue devices. It's not strong. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Standing for truth. Romat, I need to ask you a question because I'm not too okay. In Aron Ra's phylogeny challenge, is there a does he have an argument concerning the different kinds in our model that cannot breed? So it means they are not of the same kind. Does he give that argument? Is that
he uses it, yeah, but I don't know if he directly attacks it. More when he's debating against the concept of a kind, he'll bring that up.
Yeah, I would like. Yeah, so he does a bit. That's what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay. So because in evolutionary literatures, I have also come up with this argument. Even when I was still an evolutionist, this argument seems to stick to me. That not being able to breed of the different species within a kind is one of their examples. Yeah, but as far as I know, contrary to this are some examples actually of hybridization, right? Like the crossing a male donkey and a female horse produces a mule, correct? Right. Or a llama is it llama or llama or a llama and camel producing a rama or these words, rama or kama, as I recall. Right. And yeah, and another example, as I know, is the albino corn snake. Is it albino? Sorry, I'm forgetting terms. The albino corn snake and albino king snake producing a gen sorry producing so the albino corn snake and the albino king snake producing a genia or a hybrid snake. Okay, sorry about that.
Now,
And yeah,
did you? So I think we covered what we needed to do. Like I said, stay tuned for the final video in this. I'd be surprised if Aron Ra would be able to address even a quarter of what we said. It's quite technical. Any young Earth creationists in the chat have any specific questions to anything, or they've seen anything presented by evolutionists, email us. We'll do our best to assist you with an answer. Try and simplify it if we have to. Anyone else have anything to add that you feel needs to be said just to finalize our video and our debunking here? Do you feel, Jeremy, for example, do you feel everything's been said that needs to be said? And
I could go on forever, but I would like our friends here to talk more, of course. I think I've already spoken too much.
No,
already said
you
too
know what?
much.
And we saved the best for last with the DNA barcoding and the strong evidence for created kinds. It's in the genetic realm where the battle's won. Traits are inherited. Bones found in the dirt aren't. Matt covered taxonomy and cladistics quite well. So at the end of the day, watch video number 1. Video number 2 will be out soon, and this one really gets into the meat and potatoes of it all. And really addresses it from a scientific perspective. So unless anyone else has anything to say, I think we'll call it a night. Go ahead. Any last words, guys?
Well, I think I could really say a lot, but
Yeah.
for example, let's say may I move away from genetics for a while, and then I can go to the fossil. Although fossils are not my specialty, Aron Ra's phylogeny has the human evolution gorilla chimp here, right here, correct?
Correct.
So other than me using genetics a while ago, we could also use the fossil record to refute it. Like for example, all human alleged transitional fossils that are found ever only have less than 40% of the bones. And how do you present less than 40% of the bones to a court of law? So incomplete the evidence. So you will have to put a lot of imagination to fill in the 60%. And I know the most number of bones they found was Lucy, but many even say that Lucy's bones were not even 40%. It's less than 40%. So we could really attack Aron Ra's phylogeny using different fields of science, except astronomy.
Well, and I think how it just comes back to the main fact that it's all built on a primary assumption that common ancestry is true. And just like the fossil record, like you talked about, would that hold up in a court of law? Because
Nope.
when they cite these fossils or these supposed transitional forms, all it is circumstantial evidence. And the fact that they don't actually have a theory to cling to, it's not even a good hypothesis. It's a science fiction based religion. So let's say these transitional fossils that they point to, these alleged progressions, other interpretations are better explained in light of what we know about genetics, because the common descent interpretation, Aron Ra's phylogenetic systematics, we know it can't be true for all the reasons that we just went over. And obviously we can understand why, the evolutionist is bound to the neo-Darwinian paradigm, because they're going to have to interpret these fossils as, say, transitional fossils. But with us, in regards to, say, created heterozygosity, or the built-in capacity of God's animals being able to adapt to responding environmental input, selective pressures. Obviously, if these animals, say, have been adapting independently to different environments, then you're going to see the wide variety in biodiversity that we even see in the fossil record. So that, like I said, is better explained under a biblical creation model anyways. So it's all circumstantial evidence. It's not going to hold up in a court of law, and genetics destroys phylogenetic systematics anyways.
Yes, going back to genetics, I can really think of a lot of evidence against evolution. Right now, suddenly it came to mind. Again, I can go back to the phylogeny of Aron Ra using genetics. Again, at the all-important human, chimp, gorilla portion of his phylogeny tree, I can even cite the Y chromosome as evidence against to help separate the human from the chimp, gorilla, orangutan line, because the all-important Y chromosome of humans is only 70% similar to chimps. The initial prediction was over 90%. They have really way off in their prediction. Because if ape and evolution human were true, the number should be higher than 70%. Like I said, they predicted 90%. And this 70% is actually what you would expect between a human and a chicken. Why?
See,
Not humans and ape.
yeah, they try to dispute the 70% claim. They've been trying to dispute that for years.
So yes. So how did they dispute it again?
I mean, they tried to debunk, like they're trying to say no, it is 97%, but I mean, we know that it's lower than that. It's not like 97, 99% similarity. So
They may have not counted everything once again, just like a chimp human DNA. Because as we know, the chimp human DNA, the chimp DNA was not sequenced very well because of the lack of money. So they just used their evolutionary assumptions to compare the human chimp. There are some sequences that are not that cannot be compared very well because they lack the money to completely sequence the chimp DNA very well. So they cheap out, as far as I know. Yeah, you know about that, Landon?
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
It's also like I think as Ron Matt had pointed out before, like how much we have to share more genetic similarity probably with pigs than we would chimps. So that's another thing to add.
And see, new evidence keeps on popping up, coming into my mind as we talk. Again, to engage Aron Ra's phylogeny challenge, this time using the fossil record again. If human evolution were true, where are the millions of ape men and the human remains? Huh? Where are they? Have we not dig them up all yet?
Well,
Where are
even
the millions? Where are the millions of ape men and human remains?
Both groups appear abruptly, just like a lot of other animal groups. So
Yes.
there's no gradual transition.
actually, in what Raw Matt went over in his first video there, what we see, contrary to what Aron Ra would have you believe, is a lot of stasis. Remember you went over that, Matt?
Lots of pictures to show it.
Stasis.
And book, yeah.
Standing for truth, I really love the word stasis. That word stasis.
It's a great word, but evolutionists don't like.
Sorry?
No. Go ahead.
Yeah, stasis. Because as we know, there are a lot of stasis in the fossil record. According to evolutionists, actually stasis was the rescuing device when we found a lot of living fossils, and it wasn't predicted by evolution. So when we found out there are a lot of living fossils, finally they came up with the rescuing device stasis. Wasn't predicted by evolution. Dinosaur soft tissue and so on and so on, never predicted by evolution. And when they came, we have to change the chemistry of how these dinosaur soft tissue of how we understand decay. how we understand the laws of decay. So biased, really.
Well, even another thing that just kind of came to mind, that when we were talking about in the section of divine created kinds, would be orphan genes, because
Are those the jumping genes?
no,
Are
the
those the
orphan
jumping
genes,
genes?
no, the orphan genes,
Orphan genes, yes.
they're being identified in humans, and then they're they're linked to functions all over the body. And but what's important in regards to the fact that they exhibit divine creation is that these genes
Convergence.
appear suddenly, just like the stasis we're talking about. That's what brought it to mind. And they appear suddenly without any trace of ancestry in apes or any other animal. So they don't fit the evolutionary paradigm.
So
And
they're kind of like the echolocation markers, correct?
yeah, and it would be better explained under a intelligent design and concept of created kinds model, as talked about in Genesis. So I think that's another evidence genetically that kind of confirms that. And I just feel like the orphan genes are clear indication of, say, the genomic landscape that kind of reveals differences within each created kind, because they're unique to each type of organism's genome, which better fits a divine creation model versus an evolutionary universal common ancestry model. So I think the genetic evidence is everywhere.
In relation to stasis, there's an article I was going to post from Evolution News. It's called "Stasis: Life Goes On, but Evolution Does Not Happen," and it just lists all these examples of organisms that have just remained in stasis for millions of years. Like the oldest are, it says, beach living microbes, and that's estimated 3.3 billion years of stasis is what they list. So I'll post that in the chat.
So funny.
So
In regards to the orphan genes, because the thing is, these genes, I just noticed there's a few comments in the chat, so it's good to articulate their position correctly. But these genes, they don't have any ancestral sequences that they actually evolved from. So the evolutionists, I think that's what CRISPR is kind of pointing out here, believe and suggest that they have evolved suddenly from non-coding DNA. But that circular form of reasoning really is just a circular argument, because if you look at the data, it just better fits the divine creation model.
If it's so obvious, they should have predicted it, correct? But they did not.
Well, that's exactly right. It kind of falls back to the disparity of the evolutionary theory, just like we talked about 2 hours ago at the beginning of it. They force fit, in regards to phylogenetics, they force fit organisms into the tree. In order to do it, they're invoking convergent evolution, the loss of traits. So instead of actually questioning the tree, they assume common ancestry. So they're not actually interested in testing it, which means when they find this data that we've been talking about for 2 hours that doesn't fit within the tree, all they're going to do, and all they have done, is find numerous ways to force fit the data into the tree. And it just all comes back to the fact that the first and most primary assumption of all evolutionary phylogenetic classification systems, schemes, methodologies, whatever, it's that common ancestry is true. So they don't question it, regardless of the contradictory evidence, slapping them right in the face.
Really so funny. We can even use you use the geologic record to take on Aron Ra's phylogeny challenge. I can think of a lot of ideas.
Well, here's what we'll do. Is it's been a couple hours. You know, the first 3/4 is where people are going to want to dig deep, see why the primary assumption of universal common ancestry being true is actually not true. You know, that's where we started it off. Matt went into how fallacious the challenge is anyways, went into taxonomy, cladistics. Jeremy, you hit the home run in regards to the genetic markers, in regards to the DNA barcodes. Landon, you did great. Everyone did great. Stay tuned for the next video. But I think it's a good time to call it a night. Let the evolutionists have some fun with this tomorrow. And any young earth creationists have some questions, send them our way. Go watch the last previous videos. Nestle doesn't know much about genomic degradation. Every one of his arguments has been destroyed. Irrational mind. We've had some fun with that. Guys, I'll leave it to you to have any last words, and then we're going to shut her down for the night.
I was kind of hoping you guys don't respond to those atheists anymore.
Oh, well, that's the thing.
use?
Well, that's the thing. The whole point of last night's video was they had their chance. They blew it.
They're so biased. Why should we respond to them when we know their response would be using evolutionary assumptions and they won't be open-minded? So why should you guys even respond to them? Ignore them like they ignore us.
I try to ignore them sometimes, but then sometimes it's just hard to resist. I'm just so used to debating.
Yeah, they're not worth your time.
What was your first?
Else.
What was your first impression, Jeremy, of the 7-page comment from Irrational Mind? His rebuttal to our video. What was your first initial impression? Was it a laugh? What was your first thought?
Bias. First 3 objections, as I recall, already has the population genetics, which I destroyed yesterday.
Yes, I urge anybody, Nestle's blog with everything necessary, plus the LMN haplogroups. It's all there in the description box. Go read that. You'll quickly realize how weak the arguments are. And once again, just look out for the next video. We should be posting it. Matt and I will be talking either tomorrow or the following day. But guys, thanks for coming on. Landon, great job. Matt and Jeremy. Standing for Truth is out.
Bye.